Welcome to Creating the Path, a podcast for entrepreneurs who want to create their own unique pathway to success and happiness. I'm your host, Heather Grace Hanson, and each week I'll be sharing tips and strategies to help you create the path to a life you love. Let's dive in. Hey there, welcome back to the podcast. Today you have both me and Barkley at the microphone because he just keeps whining every time I try to put him down in his bed. And he just is insisting on sitting on my lap. So we're just going to keep going. And he's going to be my little co-host today. So today's episode is all about giving yourself permission to let things go. So you may or may not have noticed that I didn't release a podcast episode last week. And that is because I was working on a project that had a deadline and I didn't anticipate how much work I was going to end up having on my plate. I didn't anticipate how long it was going to take me to work on that project. And so I found myself in a situation where if you listened to my podcast episode, 2 podcast episodes previously, I think it is now, I talked about the 4 states of productivity. So I found myself in the productive and stressed state, which interestingly, I sort of realized it doesn't, when you're in that state, it doesn't necessarily mean you're stressed out the whole time. It might just mean that you're working more hours than what you normally want to or what your normal capacity is. And that's kind of where I was. There were moments of stress, but I was actually enjoying the work. And it was just that I had to kind of like push myself. So that's where I found myself. I had to let things go. I had more on my plate than I could handle, and I had to make decisions on certain things to let go of. And I ended up deciding to not do the podcast because I realized I had 2 choices. I could record a quick episode and just put it out there. But I realized I really didn't have the mental bandwidth to come up with a topic that I knew would be valuable or useful for you. That was really the deciding factor that made me decide not to do it, because I realized I was okay with recording a quick episode that is not perfect, not scripted, and just kind of doing it off the cuff. But it's really important to me to at least make sure that I'm talking about something that is going to be useful for you. I just didn't know that I had the bandwidth to do that. So that was really the deciding factor, because, I realized that letting things go can look like 2 different things. It can either look like not doing something at all or letting go of the need for it to be perfect. Knowing the priority of the things that you have on your plate ahead of time can really be helpful in making quick decisions on what you can cut out in the moment. Like when you find yourself in a situation like that where you are just overloaded with work and you hadn't anticipated it, if you've already made those decisions ahead of time, it's really helpful to quickly be able to get things off of your plate. But even if you haven't done that, you can, in the moment, look at everything that's on your plate and try to make decisions on what you need to cut out. But really knowing the priority is super helpful. And I don't know what podcast episode this was, but around the beginning of January, I think I did something on annual planning. And I talked about how the way I do my annual planning is like I come up with my overall themes for the year. And those are kind of like my overarching goals. So the way that really helped me prioritize last week, because I was able to just like go back to that and remember like what are the few main things that are like super important. And then coming up with like just the 1 or 2 things that were like the most important that aligned with that last week. And then I was able to let go of just everything else. So that's the first thing, is just like being able to prioritize. And if you can plan ahead and have that priority already set, that can really help when you get stressed out or when you just get overloaded with work. This episode is sponsored by my signature VIP day, Joyful Productivity. If you're feeling overworked and overwhelmed, I can help you create a plan that allows you to be more productive while working less. Yep, you heard that right. We'll create clear goals to focus on and cut out all the unnecessary busy work that's keeping you spinning your wheels but not actually moving you forward. After one day together, you'll have a schedule that allows you to work fewer hours by managing both your time and energy, and a foundation to support your success. Click the link in the show notes for more info and to submit your interest. And the second thing, if you have a tendency for striving for perfection like I do, I'm constantly working on it. I'm getting better at it, I think, but it's something I still always have to work on. But if you also have that tendency, letting go of things can mean learning how to accept when things are good enough and also learning to recognize when things are good enough. Because when you have a perfectionist tendency, it's highly likely that your standards for good enough are way higher than other people. And, it's a difficult thing. And as I'm saying this, I realize that alone could be a good a good podcast episode on its own, is how to figure out when things are good enough. So maybe I'll dive into that in a future episode. But yeah, the perfection thing is learning how to accept when things are good enough and also learning how to recognize when things are good enough. And that's really it. I'm just going to keep this episode short and sweet because the main message I wanted to get across to you today was just that it's okay to give yourself permission to let things go. And, just remember that the most important thing is to protect yourself and your health. And when you need to, if you're sick or if you're in danger of burning out, that is especially a time to give yourself permission to let things go and not feel guilty about it because it's totally okay. Yeah, again, the two ways that can look like is either not doing certain things at all or letting go of that perfectionist standard or allowing yourself to lower the standard on the quality. There's also that element of deciding where that level is. So going back to my example with, deciding to not do the podcast episode last week, I had to make that decision of I could have released an episode, but would it be at a high enough quality, not perfect, but would it have been a high enough quality for me to feel good about putting it out there? And I decided it wouldn't. So, in the moment, you have to make these decisions for yourself, but kind of figuring out where that line is of when to cut something out or when it's okay to lower your standards a little bit and decide if something is good enough. Yeah, just remember, it's okay to give yourself that permission to let things go. And with that, I will see you next Tuesday. And there, Barkley is with another head shake. All right, bye from me and Barkley. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Creating the Path as much as I did. You can find the show notes for this and every episode at heathergracehanson.com/podcast. But before you go, make sure to hit the subscribe button. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Until then, have a fabulous week.